a lot of the planets have weird orbital patterns and they're tilted and stuff like that.
Right.
And so the idea would now my research from Catastrophobia is based on the research of two Oxford scientists, J.B. Dallaire and D.S. Allen.
Yes.
So it's a fairly scientific book, although I write about consciousness. And they say that the planet was shattered into an icosahedral form during the final cataclysm. They say that if you study the tectonic plates of the planet, and they have an illustration for that we have become an icosahedral, that's a 20 face triangular sphere. Mm-hmm. And so then they say, and I agree with them, that the planet is actually readjusting to its new form, and it's actually becoming less and less geologically traumatized all the time.
So it's healing.
So the idea would be that, that we're not talking about the end of the world here. We're just talking about final levels of adjustment that cause a great deal of stress for the species on the planet.
But ultimately, you think the planet is healing. It's healing from the repercussion of this last cataclysm.
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
And I also think that it's a cosmic issue. Now, another thing I went to when I got into Carl's work, when I got deeply into it, I finally had to ask myself when I wrote the Mind Code back in 2007, what could ever happen that would really change anything, Mm-hmm. You finally come to that point. Mm-hmm. And so I went to exopolitics at that point. And I went into the issue of our planet being quarantined.
Yeah.
And I got together with a bunch of the exopolitical writers, some of them whom were at Stanford Research Institute, and I was shocked to discover that they were in complete agreement with all the stuff I wrote about in Catastrophobia. And they also felt that our planet went into a quarantine around 11 or 12,000 years ago, just as I do. And I'm the consciousness researcher, and they're the scientists. And so I said to them, look, the reason we went into quarantine was the cataclysms turned us into a violent and abusive species.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and then after the cataclysm, I think the worst time was 9500 BC until about 4,000 or 5,000 BC, because you have to look at the next phase after the cataclysms are complete as a period of survivalism. Mm. And there is, I don't know about you, but if survivalism comes down my walkway, I'm not going to be here. I don't want to do that. That's worse than dying, if you get my drift.
We've already been there, right? So do we really need to go back, so to speak? Is that on the path of our destiny?
My point, my point is we don't. In other words, but back to this issue of recovering our story. Mm. What we're in the middle of right now is a wonderful, dreamy recovery of the regional story. And again, I have to always watch out for the possibility that I may have all these great ideas, but nobody ever thinks about anything I think about, which is very likely. Mm-hmm. But Avatar does it.
Okay.
So when I see a film like Avatar being available to millions and millions of people on the planet, Avatar expresses regional consciousness. And that incredible tree, which of course is Carl Kalaman's Tree of Life, So when I see something available on such a massive level, I know that it's happening. And so what's the regional story? Well, the regional underworld Night 6, as I said a moment ago, is 13,800 BC to 5,900 BC. I've got to look up a date here. Mm. But the question is, what about the regional underworld Day 6? Because, see, Day 6 is a period when we always take a major step forward. So Day 6, which is a flowering period, is 21,700 BC to 13,800 BC. And then we go into Night 6. And Catastrophobia, this is amazing how many years ago this was, describes the global maritime civilization that some people think of as Atlantis. Mm-hmm. And so Catastrophobia is saying, and now I'm saying along with Carl Kalaman's dating here, that the global maritime civilization and Atlantis was thriving from about 22,000 BC until about 14,000 BC. So in order to recover our story, we need to realize that we were once very advanced and very globally connected on this planet, and we lost that during the cataclysms. Do you see that? We need to realize that, we need to see that we have regressed very, very deeply during that period of time. And when people can see that, and of course, millions at this point see this because of wonderful writers like Graham Hancock and all kinds of other writers. When you see that, then what happens is you become fascinated with the great civilization of the past. And we only have a few remnants of it on the earth, but we do have some remnants of the global civilization. So people go to sacred sites. The sacred sites, all of the sacred sites in Europe, for example, the church came along and got a hold of the pagan sites, in Portugal and
built
Spain,
churches on top of them, etc. Yeah.
Exactly, and all Europeans know this. But what a lot of Europeans don't know is that there's more layers than that. There's the church layer, then there's the pagan layer, then there's the megalithic layer, and then below that is the Paleolithic layer. So see, this planet is all coded and expresses itself through these energy forms that go way, way back into the regional underworld. Because the regional underworld, the Paleolithic period, was when we became fully human on this planet.
Very interesting.
What does fully human mean? It means spiritually connected. In other words, with the regional underworld, we see people using black ochre and ritual to bury their dead because they have a sense of the sacred.
And we were without a shattered consciousness that came about because of this trauma that you mentioned in terms of the catastrophe as well, right?
Yeah, that's true. And boy, when you start resonating with the regional mind, you actually can feel where the sacred sites are and where the vortexes are and all that, because it's a global system that's responding to the cosmos.
What can you say about some people have argued even that our solar system has been constructed, the particular way it's put together, so to speak, is a mystery in itself. And I know that you write about the moon, for instance, lunar memories and such. And when you mentioned the idea that this is like a prison planet, it's a colony right now because of the what happened here. Does the moon have a relationship in this as well, serving as a kind of a lock? Are we prevented, if I put it that way, from going outside? The Van Allen belt and all that. Are we like locked in? We can't actually escape from here at this moment?
Well, as I said, in the Mind Code, there's two issues here. I don't want to drop lunar, but in the Mind Code, there was no place to go when I tried to imagine how all this could actually happen. And I went to exopolitics and came to the conclusion that another thing that's going to happen in 2011 is the lifting of the quarantine. Now, this is very interesting because the Pleiadians said that nine-dimensional consciousness will flood the planetary field at the end of the calendar. And once that nine-dimensional form pervades on the planet, then people will start opening up their own dimensional codes in relationship to it. It's just a natural thing. And then the idea would be that the quarantine will be lifted because we will no longer be a violent and abusive species. Now, how are you going to be a violent and abusive species if you're in touch with the levels that I'm talking about with these dimensions? How are you going to be that way when you're in oneness in the eighth dimension, and you're hearing the music of the spheres and you're in the world of geometrical ideal? So you see how that and that I think is a decent description of the universal underworld. And back to the moon. I teach constant attunement with lunar cycles because I don't live by clock time. Now, another famous person who is off of clock time is Jose Arguelles with his dream spell system. I am much more off of clock time than Jose is because I simply live by the moons. I live by the new moon, the full moon. Today is the new moon in about 5 or 6 hours, by the way. And I also live by seasonality because seasonality, the equinoxes and solstices connect us with the sun. So I feel that the moon is just as natural as the earth, and I live with those cycles.
I see. Very interesting, Barbara. There's so much more we want to talk about here, obviously, so many things to touch upon. But I think it's a good time right now to take a little break and then continue talking more in our member section. But please tell us about your website, obviously, how listeners can pick up a copy of either Catastrophobia or obviously Alchemy of the Nine Dimensions.